Well, let's get more now on the legal challenges which is being mounted by the Republican Party and Donald Trump. That's because his campaign has now filed lawsuits in Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan and Pennsylvania. While the case in Georgia has been dismissed, the groundwork is being laid to contest battleground states. The filings demand better access for campaign observers to locations where ballots are being processed and counted and raise absentee ballot concerns, according to the campaign. To discuss this, I'm joined now by Thomas Dupree, a litigation attorney and former US Deputy Assistant Attorney General in Washington. Thanks very much for speaking with us here on Euronews. Can you see the legal basis here, and do you think it's a justified legal basis?
Well, we don't know whether it's going to be justified yet or not. What we've been hearing so far from the Trump campaign is that they anticipate bringing a flurry of lawsuits, many of which appear to allege voter fraud. Now, of course, in our court system, you actually have to have evidence of voter fraud if you want to prevail on one of those claims. So far, the campaign hasn't come forward with the evidence. It hasn't put the evidence on the table that says there was voter fraud. So I think that remains to be determined. But if the president's goal is to change the election outcome through litigation, I won't rule it out and say it's impossible, but it's a very, very narrow path that he's going to have to if he hopes to prevail.
Well, we now know that the US Supreme Court, it's got a 6-3 advantage for the Republicans. Is the aim of the game here to start these legal processes in a number of states and those then get that ultimately referred to the Supreme Court, where Trump might think that he's got a better chance of seeing some success?
I think that is part of the Trump administration's legal strategy, but I would say a couple things. One is that the Supreme Court would only decide individual cases. It's not going to be making a blanket decision on all of the dozens of lawsuits that are pending. And so what that means is that even if the Supreme Court were to rule in favor of the president, that might affect only 1,000, 2,000 ballots at most. And of course, if Biden has a bigger margin than that, then the Supreme Court's decision wouldn't change the outcome. The other thing I would say is that it is true that the president has appointed 3 justices to the Supreme Court. There are others who are appointed by Republicans, but our history has shown that just because a justice was appointed by a Republican doesn't necessarily mean that justice will vote in favor of the Republican. Our history is full of examples where justices appointed by Republicans vote for a Democratic program and vice versa. So it remains to be seen.
I mean, there'd definitely be a lot of pressure, though, being put on Amy Coney Barrett, wouldn't there?
There would be. I mean, what a way to begin your tenure as a Supreme Court justice, potentially being asked to cast a decisive vote in an election or in a litigation that could determine the outcome of the U.S. presidency. And look, she will come under immense public pressure to recuse herself if this scenario arises. But as she testified during her confirmation hearings a few weeks ago, that's a decision that she will make on the facts if and when the case presents itself.
I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball, your hypothetical crystal ball. Where do you think we're going to see over the next days and weeks? Do you think we're going to see Trump victories in these legal cases, or do you think it's going to just end up with them being thrown out at some stage of the legal process?
I think over the next few days, we're going to see a shift in the focus in the United States, a shift from the vote counting process, which is where we are now, that's coming to an end, and a shift into the litigation process. As far as whether the president is ultimately likely to succeed, it ultimately is going to depend, number one, on how many states he's going to need to change the outcome in. If it's a question of just changing one state, maybe he's got a chance. If he has to change 3 or 4 states, that's much tougher. So that remains to be determined as this plays out over the days ahead.
Thomas Dupree joining us there from the US. Thank you so much indeed.